What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. And also as a reminder, for you people who like to put things off to the last minute, it is the last day to file your 2019 taxes or request an extension, which you take it into October. Remember back earlier in this year, because of the COVID-19, they extended the deadline to file your taxes. It's today. So you may want to make sure that you've got that postmarked by end of business today here. All right, we've got a lot to talk about here. And as usual, I'm going to talk about the news until I run out of the news, at which point we'll open the phone lines for your opinions, questions, comments, and observations here. And probably for you people who like astronomy, Comet Neowise is now an evening object. Just after sundown, it can be seen to the northwest, and we have an article up there at whatreallyhappened.com. For those of the northerly latitudes, Comet Neowise up in the evening now, too. And I guess you could say, yeah, we're northerly here in Indiana. All right, let's talk about Helene Maxwell. As we reported yesterday, she was denied her bail. She apparently broke down in tears. She does that a lot. She did that when she was getting arrested. She's denied bail. She must stay in prison until her trial, which is in July of next year. So she's going to be spending the coming year in prison unless she gets suicided. But the judge rules that Helene has shown sophistication in hiding her finances and herself and poses significant flight risk. Absolutely she does. So she's pled not guilty to all the charges brought against her. Now, apparently, at that $1 million estate that was up in New Hampshire, was being protected by an ex-British soldier recruited by one of her brothers. So they had former members of the British Army literally guarding her while she was on the run from police. Yeah, I'd say she's a flight risk, all right. And here's the shocker. Apparently, Helene Maxwell is secretly married, but she refuses to name her spouse. And there's another target out there. You can bet the people who don't like Helene talking, trying to hunt down who the husband is, that he's in hiding good and solid. Anyway, remember Kanye West declared it for the presidency, and apparently that wasn't a joke. He really wanted to do it, but he's already dropped out. And he's dropped out of the race, but he was serious. He'd hired 180 campaign staff to get him on the ballot in Florida and South Carolina, but he's already decided to call it quits. So either he got cold feet or he got a phone call in the middle of the night saying, don't do it. Now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is in the hospital with an infection. Now, she's a, 3-4-time survivor of cancer. And she was admitted to the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, treatment for a possible infection. And apparently, yesterday afternoon, she underwent an endoscopic procedure to clean out a bile duct stent that was placed last August. Now, she's resting comfortably and will stay in the hospital for a few days to receive intravenous antibiotic treatments. All right, let's talk about Joe Biden, Creepy Joe or Sleepy Joe, whatever you want to call him about. Apparently, he's channeling Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as he unveils his $2 trillion climate agenda. He has a climate agenda, and it looks like everybody else's climate agenda from the liberal side here. And like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria, you know, they've always got the money. The money will be there. Doesn't matter how they get it. Remember when Alexandria first unveiled her Green New Deal? And everybody said, how are you going to pay for it? And she just said, well, we'll pay for it. How? We'll just pay for it. How? We'll just pay for it. So anyway, Thomas Sowell is out there saying that if Joe Biden wins the presidency in November, that will be the point of no return for the United States. Now, Thomas Sowell was a senior fellow on public policy at the Hoover Institution, and he warned the U.S. might be approaching a point of no return. The tipping point that breaks the country could be the election of Joe Biden to the presidency. I would tend to agree with that, although I tend to think we may have already gone past the tipping point. I'd like to see us be able to turn this country around and take it back to an earlier time where the people had a better standard of living, the powerful weren't so powerful, the bankers were greedy but hadn't succeeded in their plans. But I think we really have gone past the point of no return. Okay, so everybody's asking, when will Senator Ron Johnson's promised Biden-Burisma investigation report be released? After all, we're coming up on the election, and the Senate will be in session for a mere 37 more days before Election Day. Because remember, they take off early to campaign. So basically, toward the end of August, they'll gavel the Senate closed, and they'll all go back to their home districts to stump around and try and get reelected here. Now, Hunter Biden was a paid board member of Burisma Holdings. His firm, Rosemont Seneca, was paid over $80,000 a month during that time, despite the fact that Hunter Biden had no experience in natural gas, nor could he even speak the language. He did, however, have the vice president as his father. At the same time, Joe Biden was tasked with heading the Obama administration's Ukrainian policies. His crowning achievement was forcing the country to fire one of its top prosecutors, Victor Shokin, who was investigating Burisma Holdings when he was fired. Now, Senator Ron Johnson told the Fox News audience, if there's wrongdoing, the American people need to understand that. Yes, we do. We need to know. We have a right to know. The government works for us, not the other way around. The sentiment is genuine, but how close his committee, the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, is to providing this understanding is unclear. And with the Senate in session for a mere 37 more days, time is definitely running out. Yes, politics and corruption. Well, karma tends to come around, and we've seen it already. Jimmy Kimmel, Ellen DeGeneres, Robert De Niro are some that come to mind. Kimmel got canceled by the mob. Ellen DeGeneres' nasty personality caught up with her, and her ratings took a dive. Now Robert De Niro, who's made a second career of running around telling everyone he wants to punch Trump, is facing financial ruin. Okay? First of all, he's dealing with a very, very pricey divorce. But all of a sudden, his entire restaurant and hotel empire is collapsing. And suddenly the lockdowns don't look so great to Bobby De Niro. Oh, anyway. Goya Foods, under attack by the cancel crowd because the CEO of Goya is a Trump supporter. And it backfired horrifically. People are cleaning the product out of the stores. The shelves are empty. Goya's never had it so good. And there was a GoFundMe campaign set up to buy specifically Goya products for food banks. And so far, they've raised more than $175,000. So their slogan is support Trump and feed the hungry. Absolutely. Apparently, talk about, getting tired of all of this stuff. There was this all defund the cops, shut down the cops, and the NYPD shut down what they called the anti-crime unit, which had a bit of a bad reputation. But apparently it was being effective because now prominent members of the black community are calling on the NYPD to bring it back, to bring back the anti-crime unit. Let them go on doing what they were doing. They're getting tired of the high crime out there, which, of course, the liberals are blaming on loose gun laws. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. They're even blaming Indiana, if you can believe that. Indiana's to blame for the surge in crime in Chicago. All right, let's talk about coronavirus because that's still dominating the news cycle here. And the World Health Organization will not investigate the Wuhan lab where the coronavirus was kept. They announced Monday they'll not be visiting the Wuhan Institute of Virology during its investigation into the origins of the coronavirus, despite the fact that the lab held samples of coronavirus that were almost exactly the same as that which caused a global pandemic. Of course, there's an ancient Chinese proverb, never ask a question to which you do not want the answer. That appears to be at work here. Okay, down in Florida labs, they've been forced to acknowledge major errors after reporting positivity rates of 100%. Mistakes are being made. Journalists scouring the reams of data for discrepancies happened upon a bombshell Orlando Health has just confirmed that some of the data it shared over the weekend were wrong after journalists reported more than 50 labs showing 100% positivity rate or roughly around there. One local Fox affiliate looked at the numbers and contacted a few of the labs to confirm that their internal data matched the public data released by the state. As it turned out, some of these discrepancies were pretty extreme. Orlando Health, one of the organizations contacted by Fox, confirmed its positivity rate was actually 9.8%, not the 98% that had been reported to the state and the public. So they're still trying to fan up those numbers. Why? To sell more face masks? Or is it the goal of the Democrats to keep the coronavirus locked down and the economy shattered until the election in November, to blame Trump for it? I don't think it's going to work, but that may be why they keep pushing second wave, third wave, fourth wave. By the way, I did conduct that little experiment last night suggested by the caller, and I put on one of those N95 masks shortly after taking a puff on a cigar, and I was able to blow smoke through the fabric on the front. Most of it came out around the outer edges, but some came through the front. So those masks really are a little more porous than we were led to believe. The CDC director says that COVID-19 cases could be brought under control in the United States in as little as 4 weeks, but only if everyone begins wearing a mask right now. Turning to the international news, the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, warned Monday, any unilateral Israeli moves to annex territory in the occupied West Bank would fuel instability and dim hopes of a final settlement in the decades-old Arab-Israeli conflict. Monarch told British lawmakers the only path to a comprehensive and lasting Middle East peace was the establishment of an independent Palestinian state based on land captured by Israel in the 1967 war and with East Jerusalem as its capital. Any unilateral Israeli measure to annex lands in the West Bank is unacceptable, as it would undermine the prospects of achieving peace and stability in the Middle East. The monarch was quoted in a palace statement as telling British Foreign and Defense Parliament committee members in a virtual meeting. And Hamas has issued a warning to Tel Aviv that any Israeli desecration of Al-Aqsa Mosque will ignite an armed struggle. Now, excuse me a second. They're probably responding to the decision to convert Hagia Sophia back into a mosque and realizing that Israel could take over the Al-Aqsa Mosque and turn it into a synagogue. And Hamas is right. That would just set fire to the entire region. Anyway, Hamas, in a statement released yesterday, said the Israeli regime will pay a hefty price for its encroachment on the revered compound, and continuing violations of the mosque will be a cause for confrontation. The Palestinian movement also rejected an Israeli court ruling to close the historic Golden Gate, known as Bab al-Rahma in Arabic, and the only eastern gate to Al-Aqsa Mosque, underlining that the Israeli regime will not be able to withstand the power of Palestinians, as the people can make the impossible possible and abolish the occupation schemes targeting Jerusalem al-Quds. Up in the European Union, their foreign ministers are seeking measures to deter Israel from expanding its sovereignty over the West Bank. Everyone seems to think this is a really bad idea, except Israel and the United States. That includes me. So early this month, the Israeli Foreign Ministry said that Tel Aviv would postpone the 1 July deadline for the beginning of a sovereignty expansion over large parts of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley, arguing that the Defense Ministry is still weighing the risks in the field of security, as the move will have serious repercussions. Well, at least they recognize that. 11 European foreign ministers sent a letter to the bloc's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, demanding the senior official provide them with a list of measures that could be taken by the European Union to deter Israel in the event that Tel Aviv moves to expand its sovereignty over large parts of the West Bank and Jordan Valley. Well, I remember when the 1st of July came up and everybody was waiting and seeing what was going to happen. And they said, well, it's not going to be today. We're going to do it, just not immediately, and we don't know when it's going to happen, but trust us, it will. So in a very real way, Israel has blinked on this matter. And maybe the rest of the world can apply enough pressure to kind of hold them off here. Turning over to the other parts of the world here, Trump has signed measures holding China accountable for repressive Hong Kong actions. And he signed this bill and an executive order yesterday related to Hong Kong in the aftermath of Beijing passing a new national security law. The measures end the city's preferential treatment by Washington and levy sanctions against Chinese individuals responsible for implementing the security law. Here's a sanction, there's a sanction, everywhere a sanction, E-I-E-I-O. Trump told reporters at a press conference yesterday he'd signed the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, a bill passed by Congress earlier this month that allows the sanctioning of Chinese officials responsible for implementing the country's new national security law in Hong Kong. And today I signed legislation and an executive order to hold China accountable for its repressive actions, Trump said. Okay, Japan is getting a little bit nervous about all the hostilities taking place around it, not just China, but Korea. And so they've issued a defense white paper in which they're basically declaring there's an imminent threat of war in that part of the world here. This new defense white paper published by the Japanese Ministry of National Defense takes aim at Chinese expansionism and North Korean weapons tests, claiming they pose major threats to Tokyo. The paper claims Beijing is taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to further its regional ambitions. Now, the annual white paper, which the government of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe approved on, well, yesterday, criticizes Beijing for relentlessly challenging Tokyo's control over the disputed Senkaku Islands, which China claims are its own and calls the Diaoyu Islands, D-I-A-O-Y-U. Despite protests by our country, Chinese official ships repeatedly intrude into our territorial waters around the Senkaku Islands, the paper said, according to the Kyoto News Agency. Anyway. Meanwhile, Beijing is slamming the U.S. and calling them a troublemaker for undermining peace in the South China Sea. And it denies allegations it's trying to create a maritime empire. Well, who is on whose side of the Pacific Ocean? You don't see Chinese warships, you know, doing freedom and navigation exercises off the Golden Gate Bridge, do you? You see all these U.S. and British and other allied warships sailing over the Western Pacific and basically acting like, you know, this is all our territory now. And yes, you can keep 12 miles of water around the islands. We decide it's okay for you to keep. So, according to China's foreign ministry spokesperson, Zhao Lijian, the U.S. has been the troublemaker and the disruptor of peace and stability in the region. Yeah, I can see that. Zhao was reacting to remarks by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who earlier accused Beijing of bullying its neighbors and trying to create a maritime empire in the South China Sea. Numerous countries, including China, have long-standing territorial disputes in the area. Well, it's easy to dispute and say, I really think this should be mine. But again, I want to refer everybody to the Cairo Convention, which was signed at the close of World War II, which basically said that all these islands that Japan had invaded and colonized during their expansionist period were to go back to their original owners, which happened to be China. Everybody signed on to the Cairo Convention, including the United States. And basically what they're saying now is, well, that Cairo Convention, that's, you know, the late 1940s. It doesn't have any bearing, which continues a pattern we've seen with the United States, just sort of walking away from past treaties and promises that they've made here. Britain is deploying their new aircraft carrier, the HMS Queen Elizabeth, to the Far East to counter Chinese expansionism. And it's basically a sign Britain is determined to adopt a belligerent approach against China. So they're deploying one of Britain's new aircraft carriers to the Far East. News of the potential deployment comes on the heels of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to expel Huawei from the UK by 2027. We got to take a break. Commercials. We'll be right back.
Can't get no way, can't draw no pay.
Welcome back to our show here. And this next story, it's a complex issue, and I'm going to try and simplify it as much as possible. Right now, the head of the Security and Defense Committee of the Iraqi parliament has condemned Ankara, Turkey's ongoing cross-border operations in the country's semi-autonomous Kurdistan region against hideouts of the Kurdistan Workers' Party militant group, stating that Turkish forces are now deployed more than a dozen kilometers into the area. In other words, Turkish military forces have gone into Iraq, into the Kurdish area, a dozen kilometers. Now, Iraq rejects transgression of its sovereignty or airstrikes within its territory by another state. Mohammed Reza al-Haider told the official Iraq news agency on Tuesday, calling on the Baghdad government to address the issues. Now, there is a bilateral agreement between Turkey and Iraq that permits hot pursuits across the border between 5 and 7 kilometers from the border, but Ankara has exceeded the limit, and Turkish troops are now deployed along an area stretching some 15 kilometers south of the frontier. So they're mixing it up a little bit there. Over in Armenia, Azerbaijan, they're not able to keep things peaceful there. 9 more troopers killed in new clashes on the border. At least 9 more troopers have been killed on the 3rd straight day of clashes between the armed forces of Azerbaijan and Armenia on their border. Azerbaijan said 7 of its soldiers had died in the fighting on Tuesday, including 2 senior officers. Armenia said 2 of its troops had been killed. Azerbaijan's Deputy Defense Minister Karim Velayev also confirmed that a major general, a colonel, and 5 other servicemen had heroically died in action. At least 4 Azeri troops had been killed in clashes on Sunday and Monday. The Azerbaijan Foreign Ministry also said 1 civilian was killed in an artillery strike in a village in the Tovuz region here. Now, Armenia is saying it shot down an Azerbaijani drone as the fighting continues into a 3rd day. Over in Syria, they've captured some militants who are saying that they were trained by the United States and sent in to spy on Russian, Iranian, and Syrian facilities. And the detainees were shown to journalists near the city of Palmyra, where they were delivered by the Syrian army. The 3 men claimed they belonged to the Revolutionary Commando Army, a militia group based around the U.S. base in Al-Tanf in southeastern Syria. According to the detainees, they left Al-Tanf on motorcycles and rode north for a reconnaissance mission in the Mansoura subdistrict of the Raqqa governorate. Upon reaching the destination, they were supposed to look for Syrian, Russian, and Iranian facilities. Okay, now the next one probably sounds good to the families of these men. U.S. troops withdraw from 5 bases in Afghanistan as part of the Taliban deal. I kind of imagine that the former Soviet Union sort of put it that way when they lost in Afghanistan. Soviet troops withdraw from so many bases in Afghanistan as part of a deal with the Taliban. But let's face it, whatever the United States hoped to achieve in Afghanistan, they didn't. Since the United States first began its occupation in 2001, remaining troops have had to aid the Kabul government in its fight against the Taliban regime. Now, Taliban simply means students, and it's a government that rose to power to fill the vacuum left by the United States simply abandoning Afghanistan after the Soviets withdrew. Nature abhors a vacuum, so do politicians. So Washington is now prioritizing an agreement with the Islamist group in an effort to end the ongoing violence. The Taliban's point of view is very simple. Give us back our country. The U.S. has closed down 5 military bases in Afghanistan as part of a deal with the Taliban agreed to more than 4 months ago. The agreement committed to the removal of U.S. forces from bases within the first 135 days. All right. Well, at least we're getting out of that one. China has reaffirmed its firm support for the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and 5 other world states, the P5+1, calling on the international community to put pressure on the U.S., which left the deal in 2018, to abandon a hostile push to reinstate sanctions against Tehran and deal even more blows to the multilateral accord. Speaking on the occasion of the 5th anniversary of the conclusion of the deal, named the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying on Monday hailed the accord as an efficient and successful model of multilateral diplomacy in resolving international issues. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action has become a key element of the international nuclear nonproliferation system, an important positive factor in maintaining regional and global peace and stability, and good practice of resolving regional hotspot issues through multilateral approaches. Now, China is wisely and prudently avoiding the issue of whether Iran ever really was interested in building nuclear bombs. And again, all of this went forward without a smidgen of proof that Iran was doing anything wrong, or that they were in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which they have signed and ratified, and so has the United States, which allows Iran to have peaceful uses of nuclear technology. But Israel doesn't want Iran to have any nuclear technology, not just because of the idea of a possible war, but for commercial interests. Israel has nuclear technology that they're selling around the world, industrial de-staticers and so forth. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And welcome back to our show here. And on the anniversary of the 2015 P5+1 nuclear deal, Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif of Iran draws attention to the United States' unilateral withdrawal from the accord in defiance of international law. Washington's contempt for law and diplomacy poses a security threat both to America itself and the entire world. Now, Zarif issued the warning in a post on his official Twitter account yesterday, concurrent with the 5th anniversary of the signing of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which he described as last decade's greatest diplomatic achievement. The top Iranian diplomat said the occasion also is a reminder that U.S. lawless behavior should not be the yardstick by which international norms are measured. That's definitely quotable right there. Zarif also shared an image showing news headlines reporting Washington's withdrawal from other international agreements besides the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and more recently from the World Health Organization. All righty. Now, Zarif also said Iran will keep trying to send Yemen relief aid despite the Saudi siege. And Iran will keep up its efforts to transfer humanitarian aid to Yemen, denouncing continuation of the Saudi-led war and siege against the impoverished country as unacceptable. Zarif made the remarks yesterday during a video call with Hisham Sharaf Abdullah, his counterpart from the Yemeni National Salvation Government. Yemen's popular Houthi Ansarullah movement formed the government together with its allies in 2016 to undertake administration of the country's internal affairs. The allies were forced to come together after Yemen's former Riyadh-allied government fled the country amid a political deadlock, refusing to stay behind and negotiate power. Like I said before, politicians hate a vacuum. Okay, the United States Air Force Research Laboratory is getting ready to test what they call the Golden Horde bomb networking system. And it's a new technology that would allow munitions to communicate with one another mid-flight, or in this case mid-drop, making decisions about how best to attack their assigned targets. Now, the Air Force has long been researching linking autonomous drones and aircraft via artificial intelligence networks like Skyborg. But now researchers are looking to begin the first test of a related program that would allow bombs and missiles to make their own decisions on the way to their targets about how best to carry out those attacks. Now, let me give you an example of where this technology would improve things a little bit. Currently in the U.S. arsenal is a weapon called the Smart Pig, nickname. Because it's actually called the JSOW, the Joint Standoff Weapon. And it's a large canister weapon that is dropped over, say, a battlefield with a lot of enemy tanks. And it basically disperses these submunitions. Up to 100 of them, I think, is what the capacity is. And the submunitions steer themselves toward a tank. Well, I think what this system, this Golden Horde, is that they could communicate with each other and say, well, I'm going to take out that tank, so why don't you take out this one over here? That way it's not just rolling the dice, and you have 6 submunitions hit one tank and the tank next to it is unscathed. So I think that's basically the sort of context that this technology is being developed in. Anyway, the system is called the Golden Horde, named after the horse-mounted Mongol armies that conquered much of Western Asia and Eastern Europe. The Golden Horde's armies were organized into autonomous command units, making them dynamic and unpredictable and nigh undefeatable on the battlefield, since they could adapt to a changing situation faster than any comparable army that was trying to communicate with a single leader. All right, let's talk about the economic news now. Banks are bracing for an historic crash with record loss provisions. And For many years after the financial crisis, U.S. commercial banks were mocked when instead of generating earnings the old-fashioned way, by collecting the interest on loans they'd made, or even by front-running the Fed with their trading desks, they would earn their way to just above consensus estimates by releasing some of their accumulated loan loss reserves, an accounting gimmick, if there ever was one, that would end up boosting the bottom line thanks to a few kitchen sink quarters in the aftermath of the Lehman bankruptcy. The thinking here went that having suffered massive losses during the financial crisis, when all banks suffering losses so they could get bailed out, these same banks would then recoup billions in losses over time that would be run through the income statement as a reversal of accrued loss provisions, which is all banker speak for we're cooking the books here. We're cooking the books here. But the important part of this article is they're talking about they know there's a crash coming. Okay, there's a surge in small business bankruptcies underway, and the coronavirus didn't help here. And they give one example. Twisted Root Burger was a Texas success story, expanding from one casual restaurant in 2006 to 24 sites, including restaurants, bars, a brewery, and a theater. Now the company is moving toward bankruptcy. And he basically says, co-founder Jason Basso says, I'm not going to open that restaurant at half the revenue. I'm going to walk away from these restaurants. I'm not going to set myself up for failure. And that is a real problem because you have these coronavirus lockdowns where they're saying you can reopen your business, but only for half the customers you had before. Nobody has that kind of resiliency built into their business plan. You know, they're operating on very thin margins already. The economy was already stressed. More than 500 companies filed for bankruptcy under the small business bankruptcy rules since February. June was the top month for filings with 131 cases. Many were filed in states hit hard by the pandemic, like Florida, Texas, California, New York, and Illinois. So let's talk about Huawei. Trump says he personally badgered U.S. allies into ditching Huawei, saying if they want to do business with us, they can't use it. So what is basically out there is telling if you do business with Huawei, you will not be allowed to do business with the United States of America, which only works if the United States is the truly indispensable nation in terms of what it can manufacture and what it can provide. But on the day when these other countries realize they can get along just fine without the United States, such threats will lose their punch. Unfortunately, it did work. Some kind of a deal was made, and Britain is going to scrub their 5G network of Huawei equipment before 2027. So Trump is claiming he was the driving force behind the ultimatum to Washington's allies: ban China's telecom company Huawei from their 5G networks or face the prospect of no more business with the U.S. This has nothing to do with spying. It's got nothing to do with Beijing. It has to do with market share. It has to do with destroying your competition. Because on a level playing field, China's a manufacturing superpower and the United States isn't. So how's the United States going to maintain market share? They have to shut China out. By hook or by crook or by diplomacy or by threats or by bribes, they get these countries to do with, you know, American equipment, which may cost more and not be as good. In fact, I have a beef right now with the Panasonic company. I bought a new desk phone for my wife that was supposed to have Bluetooth in it. Can't get it to work. Brand new out of the box. Should have gone with something made in China. Anyway, we've convinced many countries, and I did this myself for the most part, not to use Huawei, Trump said in a speech at the Rose Garden yesterday. China, in response, is now threatening to pull their big businesses out of the Great Britain area and accuses Boris Johnson of being America's dupe for banning Huawei from Britain's 5G network. Liu Xiaoming, China's ambassador to Great Britain, said the way you treat Huawei will be followed very closely by other Chinese businesses. As he said, the decision has undermined the trust between the two countries. Mr. Liu said Huawei merely symbolizes how you treat China, in comments which came after Beijing had earlier accused Boris Johnson of being America's dupe. Certainly looks like it here. George Galloway has a different opinion. He's saying the UK ban on Huawei is national self-harm. China's riposte could be devastating to the ailing British economy. Okay, so having alienated the remaining 27 members of the European Union and set Anglo-Russian relations back a century, Boris Johnson has just declared an economic war in China. What could possibly go wrong? The British economy fell by 20% in the last quarter, a bell which tolled on the very day the government announced a raft of moves which can only be described as a declaration of economic war against China, a country of 1.4 billion people and the world's second biggest economy, certain to be biggest by 2025. The proximate reason that allowing Huawei into Britain's 5G rollout is a security risk. It's patently false. If that were true for 5G, it would be true of 3G and 3 and 4G. If it were true, then the company would have to be banished now, not in 2027, by when, incidentally, 5G will be so last year. It's not security. It's market shares, what's going on here. Gary Schilling is out there saying that the Social Security funding crisis has finally arrived. They said for a while it was doing really good. You know, the Social Security Trust Fund was doing quite well in recent years due to the post-war babies' surge into the labor force in the last decades of the 20th century, while retirees from the low birth rate Great Depression years were drawing relatively few benefits. The combination of these two forces pushed the Social Security Trust Fund balance from about zero in 1980 to 2.9 trillion today. He is not talking about all the, you'll pardon the expression, borrowing that took place during the Clinton administration. Anyway, the coronavirus pandemic threatens to undo all those gains, and without swift action by the government, a new crisis may be at hand. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Vox Media is preparing for company-wide layoffs in what could amount to hundreds of employees after missing their second quarter forecast by 40%, putting it on course to miss its full year target by 25%, according to CNBC. Now, Ron Paul, who's still out there, what he likes to do is saying, will the Federal Reserve cause the next riots? Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly both recently denied that the Federal Reserve's policies create economic inequality. Unfortunately for Powell, Daly, and other Fed promoters, a cursory look at the Fed's operation shows the central bank is the leading cause of economic inequality. They can create money out of thin air. The more money they create out of thin air, the more the ultra-rich are worth, and the poorer the ordinary people get. It's accelerating that wealth inequality. Now, there's an article that came out of shtfplan.com talking about silver slaps gold. And it attacks the conventional wisdom that gold is the best metallic asset to have by looking at how much room they have to grow here. And they go through some observations, and they see silver rather hitting $21 an ounce, 12% up from today's, before gold hits 2,000, which is a 12% gain from today's price as well. In other words, silver is gaining value faster than gold right now. Once gold does hit the $2,000 mark, silver will very quickly jump to $25. In other words, in the not too distant future, silver will emerge as the world's hottest commodity. There we are. Okay. Kind of a weird story here. This came out of CaliforniaGlobe.com, which probably makes sense here, talking about the National Education Association, which declares itself as a labor union and professional interest group representing public school educators, college faculty, retired and future educators. Is this really what they're doing? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, a labor union is an organization of workers formed for the purpose of advancing its members' interest in respect to wages, benefits, and working conditions. Yet each year during the first week of July, the NEA hosts its representative assembly at which delegates adopt hundreds of new business items, most of which have nothing to do with wages, benefits, or working conditions. For example, the NEA supports sanctuary cities, abolishing ICE, the normalization of an endless number of genders, lenient discipline policies, ousting police, Black Lives Matter training in K-12 schools, and many more divisive political issues. Consequently, retired teacher Gerald Lee Smith and dozens of her dedicated colleagues attend this meeting annually to try and make the voices of teachers heard over the din of NEA's political agenda. For their trouble, Gerald Lee and their friends have been booed off the platform, spit on, harassed, deceived, barred from committees, and shouted down during standing votes. Together, they've experienced many offensive and demoralizing situations. But after decades of abuse, courtesy of NEA, even Gerald Lee was shocked by what she witnessed at the NEA assembly last year. According to Gerald Lee, about 400 people filled a spectacular dark room, which is illuminated by rainbow-colored lights and filled with DJ's music. Dancers filled the dance floor, and a little girl on a woman's shoulders waved a rainbow flag at the foot of the stage. Several adolescent girls stood shyly by the sidelines. Spotlight shone on a huge, muscular, bare-chested drag queen in a sequin vest gyrating center stage while belting out descriptions and positions for masturbation. Mind you, there were little kids in the room here. So Gerald Lee had a desire to rescue the children immediately, and instead the NEA representative tried to make the adolescent girls comfortable with the scene, and a young man on stage spoke directly to the little girl. "Hi, sweetheart. How old are you?" She answered 6. He asked, "Is this your first drag queen show? Are you enjoying it?" Enjoying it? She lost her innocence. This is not labor union representation. It's child abuse. And we seem to see a lot of this. Now, I have no problem with people who are gay, okay? And what they do in their own home is their own business. I think where they're going to meet resistance, and are meeting resistance, is trying to go on out and get the rest of the world to normalize to them, forgetting that what is normal varies from person to person to person to person. Okay, you want to dance around in sequins, that's fine. Okay, but leave the kids alone. When they grow up, they may decide they want to dance around in satin instead of sequins. That's their choice. Anyway, let's talk about gun rights now. Giffords, the gun violence prevention organization founded by former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, announced the Road to Universal Background Checks virtual tour. A group press release announced. At a series of virtual gatherings focused on states with key Senate races, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords will lead conversations with candidates and other activists who will speak directly with voters about the importance of electing a new Senate majority that will finally pass universal background checks. Virtual gatherings, there's probably more than pandemic considerations behind that strategy, and there may be a reason, because other pro-gun control or anti-gun organizations that go out to press the flesh have a habit of trying to hide their activity from pro-gun activists, where they'll go on out there, like Bloomberg was having one, and they would notify the local court in the hopes that the pro-gun people wouldn't show up, which didn't work, by the way. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these 2 words. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Mccluskeys. Now, Mark and Patricia Mccluskey was the couple that were protecting their own home with legally owned firearms when protesters broke through the gate on and started encroaching on private property. And police executed a search warrant last Friday, confiscated the couple's rifle, and later the pistol. They got it from the lawyer's office. No charges have been filed against the pair. No rounds were actually fired here. Now, I do have one beef with this story that came out of dailysignal.com. And it's a quote. Mark and Patricia Mccluskey were seen in a video brandishing an M16A2 style rifle. Well, that's the kind of description that the anti-gunners would use, okay? What Mark Mccluskey had was an AR-15, and they're not even close to being together. The AR-15 is a .223. The M16A2 is a 5.56 millimeter, fully automatic, in that it can fire 3-round bursts. They're not the same weapon. Somebody sees, you know, a semi-automatic with a magazine and a pistol grip, you know, and it sort of looks similar, and they say, oh, it's an M16 military-style weapon. No, it is not. So anyway, GOP lawmakers wrote a letter to Attorney General Barr Friday urging the protection of the firearm rights of the St. Louis couple that saw their guns confiscated for defending their own home. And I hope Barr will do something. And the dozen Republican congressmen who signed the letter to Barr said the decision to commandeer the family's guns could have a chilling effect on all Americans. Well, apparently not, because firearm sales have gone through the roof ever since the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots have cranked up here. But you know what's going to happen as the murder rates go up, the anti-gun liberals will be blaming the Second Amendment. They'll be blaming Donald Trump. They'll be blaming the guns. So the woke anti-gunners are going to blame your gun rights on the problems they've created. Now, over in Chicago, we mentioned this earlier in the show, Mayor Lori Lightfoot is blaming the city's soaring murder rate on Trump and Indiana, this state where I'm sitting here. And her rationale is that Indiana has very gun-owner-friendly laws. The gun laws and the knife laws here are very, very low-key. In fact, they're waiving the filing fee for a concealed carry permit. It's a very gun-friendly place. And so what Mayor Lightfoot is saying, well, people can go across the border into Indiana. They can buy any gun they want. They could literally load up their vehicle with military-grade weapons. Okay, Lori, I have to stop you. I have been to gun stores here in Indiana, okay? And there's a lot of neat stuff out there. Okay, but none are military grade. So she's just looking for somebody to blame because she can't keep crime under control in her city. It is out of control. Chicago's always had that reputation. But to blame Indiana, that is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, we're going to take a break for station break. We're going to open the phone lines. And we will be right back. And welcome back to our show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Out in California, a couple pleaded guilty yesterday to bribing their daughter's way into USC, the University of Southern California, as part of the college admissions cheating scheme. Diane Blake and Todd Blake from Ross, California, appeared before a Boston federal judge via video conference because of the coronavirus pandemic, and admitted to participating in the bribery scheme involving wealthy parents and elite universities across the country, this being the latest in a long line of expected prosecutions. Okay, good old Harvey Weinstein, or Weinstein. A judge has blocked the proposed $18.9 million settlement for the accusers, and the reasoning is that he felt the money divided evenly would not be fair. It would be unfair to the women he raped or sexually abused, as it put him on the same level as those that he only verbally harassed. So he is wanting a settlement that will have more for the women who were physically assaulted, which I think is a very, very good thing to do. All right, we're going to go ahead and take some phone calls, starting with Ken in New York. Hello, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Have you noticed, well, I'm sure you have, the level of journalism has sunk to new lows when, for example, I think I read something, one of the articles about the Mccluskeys, and they described it as pulling a gun on peaceful protesters. They ascribed, yeah.
Yeah,
They've been in full liberation.
Down a gate. They're on private property.
Yeah,
peaceful
protesters that wanted to burn. Right.
Yeah.
And how's the Pan the goat god doing now? Is he still walking around with his walker?
I have no idea.
I once described him as Pan, looking like, he does look a little like him, but with a walker.
Okay, who are we talking about?
Oh, Harvey Weinstein. I once described him as looking like Pan.
Yes. Okay, you changed context on me.
No, Pan the goat god has a walker.
Well, he certainly lived his life like Pan did, and most of that, whatever the settlement is, it's going to be covered by insurance policies anyway. But he's gone away to prison for a very, very long time, and really, and this sort of thing does unfortunately go on in Hollywood. And part of the problem is there are women who expect this sort of treatment, and they're willing to go along with it if they feel it will advance their career. And that's really what makes it a complex issue.
When these I noticed that insurance companies really taken on the chin. Doesn't this affect investors? Because these guys seem to think that they buy policies where they can basically, commit up to murder and they'll still have an insurance policy pay off on them.
Yeah, I mean, there are insurance companies that will sell this kind of insurance, and the Weinstein Company had these policies for Harvey because his predilections were known.
Mm. But when they pay out, so, and what I would say so easily for something like this, who gets hurt? I mean, why would an insurance company pay out unless somebody else is taking it on the chin?
Well, insurance companies and are tightly regulated, and one of the things that are required to do is maintain cash reserves in order to make payments that would be reasonably expected. And so probably where they took it on the chin was in their cash reserves. And it was probably spread among several different insurance companies. But that's, kind of how insurance operates. It takes the money in, it tries to keep from paying it out, but every once in a while they have to.
I would only disagree with you on one thing. I think if you went to Lloyd's of London, they might insure a star's legs or some other part of their body.
That was a PR stunt.
I find it hard to believe that Lloyd's of London would write a policy that they know they're going to, take a loss on like that.
Well, look at all the insurance companies that insured the Titanic. Bad things happen. Bad things happen.
Point taken.
I think Lloyd's was one of them.
Maybe they've gotten a little more sophisticated over the years. It was more than 100 years ago. So.
Well, I'm sure they're a lot more sophisticated now. You got it. And I'm sure they're, much more up on statistics and actuarial tables and trying to figure what are the odds that something is going to happen. But as far as Lloyd's, I think it was Betty Grable had her legs insured by Lloyd's of London. It was a publicity stunt. And nothing ever happened to her legs other than age. And that was definitely excluded in the insurance policy. Okay, we're going to switch over to Dan in Washington State. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking the call. By no means, I don't think they should take down historical statues, like them or not. They are history, and a lot of them are art. But, I listen to a lot of Rents Radio Republic, and I always hear people say, well, the Civil War was not about slavery. Anyone that knows that, it's not true. And I'm studying the Civil War, and it's clearly about slavery. I mean, the only reason states' rights was an issue is because they wanted slavery in certain states. So it was clearly an issue, and I don't think the states. It's very similar to the illegal immigrant issue. The same interests, just want cheap labor. So I think, would you agree that it's obviously about slavery, the Civil War?
No, I wouldn't agree. It was about money. It was always about money. And the idea was that the South at that time was generating much of the tax revenue for Washington, D.C., and going back to the original Constitution, which said the central government was going to be very limited and very small, many states were starting to get very upset at how greedy Washington, D.C. was becoming and how much power they were accruing to themselves that wasn't authorized by the Constitution. So citing the constitutional limits on the federal government is what led to several states seceding and saying we have a right to break off from Washington, D.C., the way the original colonies broke off from London, and we're going to form our own confederacy. And Lincoln realized that he couldn't raise an army among the Union people by saying, this is a war to bring the Confederacy back in so that we can tax them. And so Abraham Lincoln made slavery the issue. And it was a very powerful issue, and a lot of people had strong opinions about it. And that's why he was able to get so many people to walk into that meat grinder.
Well, what about the Missouri Compromise? I mean, they were arguing which states will be slave and which ones will be free, and the Confederacy were all slaves. I mean,
yes,
so obviously they wouldn't have had that argument if slavery wasn't the key issue.
I think it was an issue, There was no question it was an issue, but it wasn't the main one. The main one was basically money and a growing federal government. And if you want to see some documentation about that, look at the amendments to the Constitution that were passed immediately following the surrender of the South, which includes the one that the federal government can borrow all the money it wants to, and the states can't say anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, but the reason that they were wanting to secede, it to me, it's just like Tyson chicken. You know, if they actually did try to, you know, send the Border Patrol in and get rid of all of Tyson chicken's workers, they would probably send every white and black person in Arkansas to defend their chicken plant. You know, and that's, to me, what these slave owners were. I mean, they're not, so I don't know. And anyway, and then going on to reparations, there were some people like Monsanto, you know, these big slave owners that never fought in the war on either side, but then went on to continue their operations and own a lot of the banking system and stuff. I think I wouldn't have a problem if they targeted those people for reparations myself. Even if, you know, if it's in the same family.
Again, I'm opposed to the idea of reparations because you're forcing people who have never committed a crime to pay money to people who've never been the victim of the crime. Because everybody who owned a slave and abused a slave is dead, and all those slaves are now dead. And the people who are alive today had no part of that. I've never owned a slave. And my ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad, and no black person alive today is any more of a slave than the rest of us are trying to fill out that 1040 form before midnight tonight.
Right. But what about like Monsanto? I mean, they profited off of the slavery, and they didn't fight or lose anything in the Civil War, and they just went on to continue taking over more of the economy and making us eat GMO food. You know, I mean, I don't know. I disagree, but Lincoln, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation, so that tells you the North won and slavery was made illegal, so at least it did put an end to slavery. So that's all I got. Thanks a lot.
Okay. All right. Well, keep telling yourself that we put an end to slavery when you're signing off that 1040 form tonight. Thanks a lot, Dan. We're going to switch over to David in Boston. Hello, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, aloha, Michael. Hey, Michael, this is like the...
Hello, David? David, we cannot hear you. I don't know if it's your phone or what's going on.
Oh, that better? Michael?
Okay. Yeah? Can you hear me?
Oh,
Hang on a second. Well, okay, apparently we're having a problem. Mike, can you talk to me?
I'll also give the COVID-19 virus a name, a Chinese name, the Fu Man flu. So you have Dr. Fauci Chi and the Fu Man flu. And the reason I do that, Michael, is I'm trying to keep it Sino-centric. I live up here in Boston, and in Massachusetts, and you can't believe just how many people think that President Trump is all to blame for this pandemic. And by calling Fauci Chi, Dr. Fauci Chi, give him a Chinese name, and I always refer to the pandemic, the COVID-19, as the Fu Man flu. And that's my way of keeping it Sino-centric so they don't get away with pulling the monkey on President Trump's back, you know?
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
so that's about it, Michael, because I just kind of clarify yesterday's call because I don't think you quite knew where I was coming from, but it was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek call, but it was dealing really with a serious subject, as I say, dealing with a serious subject with humor. But as far as I'm concerned, it's Dr. Fauci Chi, and it's the Fu Man flu.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the information on the phone call. We seem to have gotten our technical problems sorted out here. So let's go to Bobby in Florida. Hello, Bobby. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, Mike. Just let me not the one who's sick, but I can't talk to him. He's 50 miles away. I don't have his phone number, but anyway, he's doing better. But my brother told me he talked to him, and his voice sounds really scratchy. He doesn't smoke or anything. He said if he still smoked, he'd probably be dead. But it really got him bad.
Yeah.
Where he said it felt like something on his chest. He couldn't get up. He couldn't move, and the last 3 days he's doing okay, doing a lot better. He even went out and tried to mow the yard, but he said it was pretty scary. And the thing about it is he was really mask paranoid. He wouldn't even come around my mom or he's my stepbrother, my other brother. He wouldn't come around their house. And, me and my other brother, we laughed about it because we thought the whole thing was just, kind of a hoax or something, like it wasn't as bad. But I'm hearing more and more about around this area. People are getting it. And I know I have Mexican friends, and of course they have a lot of relatives, but there's a few of them around here that actually died from it. And the scary thing is, one of them, they were telling me, she was 49. She just had it for like a few days. She just had the symptoms, and a few days later, she just dropped over dead. So, and then I'm hearing a story, I guess, in Tampa, there's something in the newspaper, something similar happened to a man who was 36 years old. Like 4 or 5 days later, he just dropped over. I keep hearing about that. So I think this might be, this is real, folks. This isn't no crap, because I was on board with everybody else. Like, this isn't, no, I'm seeing it. It's hitting right around here in this area. And I've been telling you, my friend works at the hospital, and now he's got people there, and he's not going to lie to me. There's 18 people. He's not seeing ventilators or anything, but he says they're in there. So just let everybody know it's real. And I don't wear a mask because I still have I don't believe you can catch it like that. And I still tell Dustin, I go out without a mask. I'll go to my brother. I just don't believe you can catch it like that. And I think the key is to keep your immune system. You should share a little bit of information. If anybody has anything to boost your immune system, put it out there. I did the colloidal silver thing. And like I told you yesterday, I explained it to you. Now I'm doing the garlic and the cayenne pepper. And the commercial you have about all those ingredients, that heartdrop.com, that stuff sounds like it would help your immune system. Yeah, I would look into that. I don't know. I'm getting to be build my immune system like Dustin is with the mask.
Well, don't forget the cinnamon. Don't forget cinnamon, because there are, during the Spanish influenza, they realized that these people who worked at this factory that ground up cinnamon tree bark into the powdered cinnamon for bakers and stuff, none of them ever got sick, and they were breathing that cinnamon dust all day long.
I heard you talking about that before, but I've heard about that too. Cinnamon and honey work together.
Yes.
I had like a boil on my leg, and I put some on there just out of curiosity. The next morning, it was, talk about it was gross, but it really did. It brought that thing to a big head. That works too, yeah. But as far
Have you ever tried Manuka honey?
What's that?
Manuka honey from Australia.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah.
No. It's
pricey, but it's very, very good.
Oh, I have to look into that. It might cost a little more than the stuff at Walmart, but it's just important.
The stuff at Walmart isn't real honey anyway.
No. Coconut oil too. A lot of people, I found out that helps you with your memory. They found out that helps people with Alzheimer's and people who are having loss with the ketones in your brain. You've heard all that. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Who told it to me.
A lady in Tampa is the one who discovered it. She was a nurse, and her husband, she noticed he was in his 50s. He was forgetting things, and they started working with it and giving him coconut oil. And coconut oil had a bad rap for a long time for being bad cholesterol, but they find out it's really good cholesterol now.
Yes.
And, you look at a lot of Polynesian people, they look pretty healthy. I'll let you go, Mike. I thought I'd put that out there. This thing is real. I'm not lying. I have
it is.
To lie about.
We now have a few cases right here in Santa Claus.
Okay, Mike. Well, I'll talk to you later. Let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch over to John in Tennessee. Hello, John. I'm probably going to have to take you through this next commercial break. What's on your mind?
All right. Well, first I want to let you know that where I'm at on the Civil War, I'm a transplant in Tennessee from Illinois, the land of Lincoln. But I also want to let you know the Civil War is no longer a topic of conversation in the workplace. Thomas Dilorenzo, are you familiar with him, the author?
No.
Okay, he's a presidential historian. He's written 3 books on Lincoln, and he just released his 3rd one, and I ordered it on Amazon. It's called The Problem with Lincoln. And I think a lot of our listeners know that Fox News Channel always lionizes Lincoln, and Tucker Carlson loves to get up there and say, Lincoln won the war, the North won the war, so shut up, get over it. Dilorenzo, what made me order the book is an interview he did with Brian Lamb on C-SPAN way back in the day. And basically his point was that Lincoln committed treason by sending 75,000 troops in to attack the South. And then another thing he said is all the Northern academics back then, I mean, being in the Union was strictly voluntary. That's the way the
John, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And welcome back to our show. And a reminder that, pardon me, Republic Broadcasting is in the middle of a perpetual fundraising campaign because we need your help to stay on the air. Equipment wears out. There's electric bills, water bills, rent, server farm bills, and so forth and so on. We really do need your help. We don't have an angel that is giving us gobs of money to do what we do. We rely on some ad revenues, and our advertisers are under attack, try and scare us away. And so we really are dependent on you. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. And the network thanks you here. Okay, so let's see. I think we were talking with John in Tennessee. Mike, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so John, can you kind of pick up where you left off?
Yeah, what I was saying is I was talking about an author, Thomas Dilorenzo. He's a guy I found through like Tom Woods and the Von Mises Institute, and this goes back to the Ron Paul movement, when we all started getting wise to the Federal Reserve. And I mean, we made it a national conversation along with states' rights and everything like that. But Dilorenzo, he just released a 3rd book, and I heard about it, so I watched the interview with him on Brian Lamb. And that's what compelled me to write the book is before this book, I mean, he was saying that several white Western countries in Europe had ended slavery without a war. We're the only country that had a war, which makes our point. The wars are about money. But he also said that, being in the Union was strictly voluntary. That's the way the Constitution reads.
Yes.
And the Northern academics were writing, let the South go. Let the Southern states go. We'll just invite them to come back to the Union down the road. That was their position. So the point was that, Lincoln committed treason by, his little deception at Fort Sumter and then getting them to fire on him first and then sending 75,000 troops to attack Americans. That's an act of treason. So, he didn't just bash Lincoln. He did his research. And he said Lincoln was a brilliant man, no doubt about it. He just used his genius unfortunately, he caved into evil. But, the Fox News crowd and, they just lionized Lincoln, and Obama tries to call himself Lincoln, and Trump's going to try to call himself Lincoln. And, the people don't know the context of it, that it was about states' rights, not about slavery at all. Slavery could have been ended without a war, and we had more than enough people that didn't have slaves, and there were white slaves. Everybody brings that up, but nobody brings it up, you know what I'm saying?
And there were black slave owners.
Yes, exactly. So now what's scary is that I was telling a coworker at work, I found, some people that, listen to right-wing talk radio, and you try to nudge them to take it a little bit further and get out of the paradigm and stuff. And I was mentioning the book, and I said Lincoln treason, 75,000 troops. That's all I said.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you know it, 3 days later, my supervisor pulled me in the office and said, do you remember having a conversation with somebody about? And then I said, yeah. I was telling somebody about a book on Amazon I ordered. He said, okay, well, I have to do an investigation because you hurt somebody's feelings. And I said, and then he said, did you say Emancipation Proclamation? I said, no. I guarantee you those words didn't come out of my mouth. And he goes, well, unfortunately, in the environment we live in, I have to write you up because it's about people's feelings. So it's getting so bad in the workplace now. You're not talking about politics anyway, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, you know, again, I kept it above board. There was nothing racial I said. I was recommending an author. But, I mean, people are running around and they're saying Trump and they're saying stimulus check. And you know what? I guess I can just march in the office. Not that Trump's my president. I didn't even vote. I stopped voting after they railroaded Ron Paul and ran his delegates out of the convention in Tampa. I stopped voting. I'm done. But seriously, I guess I can go in the office and say, I was offended. They're talking politics and I don't like it. You know, I don't want to go to war with that either, but my gosh, to think that my job is threatened now, if I say something like black ink on white paper and somebody turns around and goes, oh, and they take it out of context. This sucks. Mike, this sucks. This really sucks. Trying to tiptoe.
It does. We become such a nation of whiners and fragile egos. And, you know, somewhere in the bowels of the Pentagon, they're actually thinking they can fight and win wars with the current generation of young people.
Well, and not only that, again, and you know, there's a bunch of social misfits out there that just believe everything on TV, and they're just gunning for whites because they can gun for whites, and they think it's funny. And it's like, how would you like me to mess with your livelihood? I mean, there's not going to be any more stimulus checks. I watched these people get their stimulus check and go, can I go home early? And they went out and bought 60-inch televisions, Mike, and Xboxes. There's no more stimulus checks. These people are going to be thrown out of their apartments in 2 months.
Oh, man. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to have to let you go for another commercial break here. But you're right. Some people were very foolish and reckless with those stimulus checks. We'll be back after these few words. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Michael, good day to you. Yeah, first off, the last three callers are good, but, getting to this, the one caller you had talking about reparations, that got me a little bit as far as, look, during the Civil War, Mike, we know the South was 2.9 million in the South when the Civil War broke out. There was already over 1.5 million of them were freed in the North. So, hear about reparations. They're 41 million of the population now, so I don't believe there should be a ding dime for reparations. They had nothing. None of these people are alive today had nothing to do with slavery, so give me a break. It's all nonsense.
Yes.
As far as a couple of your other callers, and the one caller is wonderful when he's saying what they're trying to, what Massachusetts and those northern states are doing to Trump is disgraceful. And Michael, have you ever heard of a guy named Tim Clement?
The name seems familiar, but enlighten us.
Well, he's a gentleman who passed away a couple of years back, but he was the one that said that we needed a guy like Trump to come into power because the country is going so demonic and switching so evilish that there was going to be a guy like Trump, and he predicted a guy like Trump would come into power in 2008. He died 10 years later, but he was pretty right on his predictions. He's like, I'm not saying he's Nostradamus, but he was a pretty intelligent guy. His name was Ken Clement. He played piano and he played a lot of instruments. He was like he had telepathy or something. I don't know. He seemed like he was right on the money in a lot of things if you watch his videos. Very fascinating guy. But yeah, Mike, getting back to the slave trade. Brazil didn't end the slave trade till 1888. That was the last slave ship that went into Brazil. 1888. Yes. And the Spanish kept slavery going till right after the Civil War. Here in the United States, they got the slavery ended in 1807. 1807, that was it. They didn't bring no more slave ships over here. So as far as that went down, the founding fathers knew that slavery was basically bad, and of course they had the Civil War. And the last caller he had about Lincoln. Well, Lincoln did commit, in a lot of ways, treason what he started, believe it or not, because the Civil War could have been maybe ironed out, because you remember the slave trade, the biggest, I don't know if your callers noticed, but the 3 biggest slave traders in the South were Afro-American blacks.
Yes.
Mississippi, why don't they do some research on the biggest slave traders in the United States in 1860? They'll be shocked who was the ones that owned the biggest slave trade. So as far as that goes, Mike, I just don't want to say it. It's like there's reparations. They want to change all these names on these sports teams. What are they going to take down? They want to take down the Texas Rangers. They're a bunch of white racists and all. I mean, come on, Mike. This is absurd. And like I said,
well, it's doubly absurd. It's doubly absurd when you have these people who are seeing racism where it doesn't really exist, where they're just saying, well, I think it means racism, and therefore you should go along with me. That really is absurd.
Yes, sir. It absolutely is. And, I know what's going to be the outcome. If I don't know, if that last caller said your one caller said he ain't going to vote. He voted for Ron Paul, but he ain't going to vote for Trump. No, I think you should vote for Trump. He's the best of the 2 evils here. What do you want, a Joe Biden, a bumbling moron idiot with a 100-year-old brain? So to your one caller that called in about, yeah, you need to vote for Trump. You want illegal immigration by the hundreds of millions? I mean, Ron Paul never did what Donald Trump did about immigration, Mike. Donald Trump was talking today about MS-13, all the murders. Look, we didn't have no white. I call them the pioneers went to wussies. We don't have no whites saying, we're going to go protest all these white Americans got murdered by illegal aliens, Mike. What about the 2 girls that got butchered with machetes? What about Molly stabbed 15 times? Kate Steinle shot in her dad's arms on a fishing pier, walking out with her dad, who was not doing well. Come on, Mike. We're talking thousands and thousands of white Caucasians getting murdered. Now that we're not even talking, there's a lot of Afro-American blacks who lost loved ones through illegal aliens and through DUIs and all that. So I don't hear none of your callers talking about none other president who ever did what Donald Trump did, Mike, and you know that.
Yes.
Even Ronald Reagan, the great Ronald Reagan. And they're flying his flags over here right now, stickers here in South Florida. Ronald Reagan, Pagoya Food, and Trump. So to your callers who keep saying that Trump hasn't done nothing, they're liars. They're all phony liars. And you know what, Mike? I got to tell you one more thing. The CBDC right here in Florida admitted that the reason there's such a spike in Florida is because New York and New Jersey is bringing all these people in from New York and Jersey, those eastern states of north. So just so you know, Mike.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
That was on the news today. That's about it for today. I'm a little riled about the reparation crap. Makes me sick. All right. Thank you, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah, well, it makes me sick too, and I think it's utterly ridiculous. First of all, I reject the idea of collective guilt. Okay? I'll accept responsibility for those bad things that I've personally done, but I don't accept responsibility for something the neighbor did. Okay? Because I have no control over him. I certainly don't accept the responsibility for things that happened before I was even alive. But it's that collective guilt on which they're building the foundation for reparations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to switch over to Miles in Maine. Hello, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Wow, that was a power-packed call by Tom again, as usual.
Yes.
But, yeah, Michael, I want to applaud you for straightening this guy out. I mean, he tried to jam that down your throat, and you do what Tom does. You just gave him the facts, I mean, by the time the Civil War was coming about, slavery was basically over. Slavery was no longer profitable with the invention of the cotton gin.
True.
I think people forget that, So, and you were, of course, exactly right. It was all about economics. It was all about the North trying to make the South pay for their industrialization.
Yes.
And, yeah, this guy that calls from Washington, I've heard him a few times. He's kind of on the level of Paul and Dustin, that kind of thing. I mean, this guy, he's calling from Washington, all right. He's probably calling from Kronk or Crone or what's Chop or whatever they're called, the thing down there in Seattle. He's probably at the headquarters down there,
Mm-hmm.
His marching orders. I don't know, but it sounded crazy, and it was good thing that you really got him straight too about this reparations. If these people want reparations, why aren't they going back to the tribes that captured them and sold them? I mean, wouldn't that be the original contract? Yeah, wouldn't that be where the original contract took place?
Yes.
So it's just absolutely the stuff and this thinking of these people, even some of the people that come on here, and I'm sure they troll it up on here a little bit, but it's absurd. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. The other point I wanted to make is these people, first of all, this couple, this apparently liberal couple that are attorneys in St. Louis, how come they're not, nobody here is mentioning the Stand Your Ground law that was passed? I mean,
Yes.
Nobody's mentioning anything like that. Why isn't the Justice Department going after these states and these counties and these communities? They have the authority to come in there and with oversight and review this disparaging treatment in the law and direct violations of the law, and they have the right to come in there and come up with these different, as I recall, they were called justice decree or whatever from the Department of Justice. These decrees where they can come in there. Michael, maybe you can comment on what I'm speaking to at this point.
Well, again, you get into an issue of, how the state's going to respond to the federal government coming in and interfering with their internal affairs, because that was also a factor in the Civil War. In the run-up to the Civil War, is the states viewed themselves as sovereign entities. That's why it's called the United States of America rather than the United States.
They are sovereign entities, but when they're violating constitutional practices, I think they lose that immunity.
Well, I didn't say they had immunity, but I said that they're going to have an attitude that, there are certain things that they have the right to manage within their own state. Now, I'm in agreement with the Stand Your Ground law, and I don't think the Mccluskeys did anything wrong. In fact, had I been in their position, I would have done exactly the same thing. You've got these protesters out there that the media has been showing starting fires and breaking windows and so forth. They've broken the gate into a private residential area, and they're starting to trespass on private property. At that point, it's safe to assume they're not coming over to play canasta and share, giant pickles or something. They represent a threat of harm to your home and to your property, and you do have a right to stand your gun. Stand your ground, rather.
And by acquiescing to the lawlessness, they are multiplying lawlessness, and these people are seeing it and getting away with it and saying, "Look, nothing happened to me." Now back to this guy, and I'm in such agreement with Tom on this. You're so mad about Ron Paul. Well, you know what? I did a lot of work for Ron Paul myself. And you know what? Ron Paul will be the first one to tell you that's not what to do. I can tell you that firsthand. But, I don't understand the mentality, Michael. If you're so pissed, at the Republican Party because of what they did, why wouldn't you vote for the guy they hate even more than Ron Paul?
Yeah.
I don't understand the mentality of this generation or whatever's going on here, Michael. I'm up here with your class, kind of, and I don't understand this. They want to give up, fret, cry, whine. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to. Well, every time you don't vote, we get Pelosi or we get AOC or we get Schiff or something like that. So you keep doing it and see how much that helps you. Because we're going.
And remember, if you don't vote, somebody will vote on your behalf using your registration.
Well, isn't that the truth? Especially the way these Democrats are pushing this stuff.
Yep.
And it's just ridiculous. And this is amazing to me too. With all this going on, we still got time for more gun laws, even though, the woman that says all life matters is getting killed in the streets by BLM, and nothing's going on. It's not a hate crime. It's not nothing. I don't know. Did they even catch the person that did it?
No, they didn't.
Yeah. Well, you know what? There needs to be a reward. They need to go back to the old days. They need to start rewarding the snitches. They need some more snitches. And it's just ridiculous, Michael. Now, on the other hand, I heard that Trump or it might have been Barr have located many of the instigators of these riots. And wouldn't it be nice to get some interrogation out of that to find out what exactly was the derivative of that, who sponsored it, who was given the marching orders, just like you do with a drug dealer. You don't bother the guy with these small amounts. You have him tell you who's the guy delivering the big stuff.
Yes.
So,
Just work your way up the food chain.
I think we need. Exactly. And I think we need to start using these things. We need to start going back to what worked for us. Just because something's new and bright and shiny don't mean it's better than something else. And just replace something because it's new and bright and shiny, but it's yet to be proven. And who knows? I mean, how many times have we seen these, different issues fail? I think we need to get back to what worked for us, get these people, enforce the law, put them in jail, and not put up with it, not tolerate it. And I think that's the key to getting this whole thing, this whole train back on the tracks. And we got to start there, and we got to do it now. But Michael, thank you so much. Keep up the great work. Keep up the education like you've been giving these guys. It's priceless.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call and for the kind words. And we're going to switch over to Joseph in North Carolina. Joseph, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Rivero. I was just wanting to call to talk about the whole coronavirus scandal. I personally, and I think there's a lot of evidence to back this up, I think that it's a complete psyop. I mean, for one, the CDC has told us that the death rate is only 0.26%, and that's only for the 20% of people who even become symptomatic. So really, the death rate is far less than that if you add in the symptomatic people. Two, the tests are noticeably fraudulent. I mean, the FDA for the antibody test took off. Yeah, they took off all regulations for them as far as quality control goes. So anybody can come to the market and start selling these things, right? And not only that, but I talked to some of the nurses that are in the testing facility in my area, and they even said that, yeah, we're getting false positives all over the place. I said, really? Tell me about one of them. And they said, well, one of the first cases in North Carolina was a guy who had gone to one hospital, gotten a test, tested negative. Then a couple of days later, he died. It wasn't until after he died, they tested him, and he came back positive, right? So not only that, but you have people inflating the death rate. You have people like the CDC releasing these new coding guidelines like U071 and U072 that basically says that any case that's thought to be COVID is going to be considered a COVID case. Like, you don't even have to have a test; it just has to be presumed to be COVID. Yes. And then on top of that, you had people like Kumo up in New York who was putting a do not resuscitate order on heart attack patients. I mean, how the hell are you supposed to do that? If he put a do not resuscitate order on heart attack patients. So of course, what was happening was these people were dying of heart attack. I think they had a 77% death rate for heart attacks up in New York. And so these people were dying from heart attacks, and then they're coding them as using U071 and 2 and saying that this was a COVID death. Now, you might think that, well, how do they come to that conclusion? Well, I have a friend here who works as a paramedic here in North Carolina, and his wife died of a heart attack not too long ago during the peak of this COVID pandemic in March, and he was on the scene when she died. He said it was clear case of heart attack. Now, here's something to remember about heart attack patients. Heart attack patients have fevers. A fever is also a symptom for COVID. So when they coded her death, they said that she was COVID, that she was a COVID death because she had a fever. And my buddy told me that it was a clear heart attack case. All right, and he's worked as a paramedic for years and years and years. All right, now not only this, but Kumo was taking people out of the hospitals and putting them in the old folks' homes, okay, which is then driving up the death rate even more. All right, and so this 0.26% figure that the CDC came with, which is so low that it's actually lower than the death rate for a freaking flu shot, all right, is actually even far lower than that. So, I mean, it's a complete fraud from top down. And not only that, but they're trying to force on us a vaccine now, which is, or they're going to try to, which is going to be highly experimental, rush the market, and then supported by the PrEP Act, all right, which gives the emergency manufacturers immunity from liability, all right, and
Okay.
and they're going to try to take this highly experimental vaccine made from experimental technology, rush to market. Which, by the way, no coronavirus vaccine has ever been successful. In most cases, causing mitochondrial storm or in the patients, leading to a sort of autoimmune attack, which was killing the test subjects. All right, and now we have Alan Dershowitz, who is bold enough to say that that people have no right not to take the coronavirus vaccine when it comes out.
Yeah,
and he's going to go to the
that.
Supreme Court to argue this. Yeah, he's going to go to the Supreme Court to argue this. Now, this is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing is Bobby Kennedy is going to be debating Alan Dershowitz. And I have a feeling that Bobby Kennedy is going to hand Alan Dershowitz's butt to him because this guy has been in this field for many, many years at this point. All right. And so I think that debate is coming out on July 20th. And I think it's really important that everyone listen to this and everyone follow follow Alan Dershowitz really closely all the way up through the Supreme Court because this
Joseph, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're getting close to the end of the show and the phone lines are loaded up, and I want to give some other people a little bit of time here. But yes, I want to see that debate between Robert Kennedy and Alan Dershowitz.
All right, no problem. You have a good night.
All right, thanks a lot. We're going to switch over to Terry in Texas. Hello, Terry. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael. Good day to you. Thanks for taking my call. I'm just going to try to shed a little light that I can to kind of ease some of the fear that the media is creating with this COVID mess. The caller before you is right on the money. It's a huge psyop.
Hello?
Hey. Hello?
Hello? Are we having technical difficulties again?
I can hear Mike, but I don't think he can hear me.
I hear you.
Okay, well, let me continue.
Please do.
Thanks for taking my call. And I was just going to try to shed a little light to ease some of the fear that this media is creating concerning the coronavirus. I work in an emergency room and been there for a while. I am face-to-face with corona patients day in and day out for months and months. And I don't get sick. I don't even... I really don't wear a mask. I wear a surgical mask only because they make me do it. But there's so much fear in, the doctors and nurses and just the general public.
Okay, we seem to have lost his connection again. Dan called back in here from Washington State and wanted to respond. So, Dan, are you there?
I'll make it. Yeah, I'm here. I'll make it quick. As far as the slavery didn't end in 1807 or 9, the importation did, but they could still, and they used to breed slaves. So
yes,
if slavery, if they could have just bred massive amounts of more slaves. So I mean, the population of Texas could have been like 90% black and mulatto. Same with Florida, Louisiana, all those states. So we don't know what would have happened if the South would have won. They could have made a deal, so I'll make that point. As far as this right to secede, it's not really in the Constitution. In the Constitution, it says a state cannot make a deal with a foreign government without the Congress.
Yes.
So I would use that to say, well, that means you can't secede. I mean, they didn't solve the issue when they made the Constitution, so I don't think there's a right to secede or really specifying you can't. But I think that tells you that the Congress. Now I don't know how the Congress voted on secession. I'm still looking into that. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but and it just for Tom's thing, Reagan was not the great. Reagan is the reason California is going to be part of Mexico pretty soon. He passed the first amnesty. Reagan pretty much killed family farms and, made everything corporatized and monopolized and controlled by Wall Street bankers, really. And if you look, there's that article, Whitney Webb, about Epstein. It goes all through the Reagan people, all through the Meyer Lansky. I forgot what that Whitney Webb article was, but Mossad, Epstein, and the Reagan's administration was full of that stuff. So anyway, I'll let other people on. And like I said, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious slavery was an issue, and that's why they wanted states' rights to begin with. And after the war, they were freed. So that prevented the whole South from being like 90% black and mulatto right now. In my view, it would have ended up like Dominican Republic or Haiti. So anyway, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call, and my apology to the callers who hung up, lost patience like Mark. Sorry about that. It's a complex issue, and like much of anything else in history, we've been lied to a lot about the causes leading up to the Civil War. I hesitate to use the word traitor with regard of anything that Lincoln did, not because he didn't do what he did, obviously, but treason is specifically aiding an enemy during time of war. And had Lincoln been secretly helping the Confederacy, that would be an act of treason. But declaring war against another country may be ugly and brutal and distasteful. It is not necessarily treasonous. Yes, he was killing other Americans in the Civil War, but that's what civil wars are. And ours was hardly the first, it'll hardly be the last. But the issue, again, was really about the South was financially prosperous in part because of the slaves. And one of the reasons that Lincoln wanted to free the slaves was to reduce the South's ability to out-earn northern industrial centers. It was all about shifting the center of economics in the United States from the Southern Democrats up to the Northerners. All right, there's our music. It's time for us to get out of here. Please mention RBN to all your friends. Same thing with whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate all that you can, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Aloha, America.